Item 10, Barbara, CCG and direct commissioning assurance processes.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. This paper and the two attached framework are here to seek the Board's approval to publish formally the frameworks on CCG and our own direct commissioning activities and the assurance of them. There's been very significant engagement about these documents with CCGs and our direct commissioning units and all the stakeholders relevant to our commissioning since we published the CCG interim assurance framework in May. And I think that there are some really important, two or three important aspects about the two frameworks which they both have in common. The first one is that they're both underpinned by the domains that we used in authorisation to be the hallmarks of a good commissioning organisation. The authorisation process, I think, was widely acclaimed as being successful and being appropriate, and it's good to see that those domains have stood the test of time. If I can just remind the Board, because I do think they're so important, that is that this is an organisation with quality and clinical engagement absolutely at the heart of what it does, and improving quality for patients being the fundamental essence. The second domain is making sure that patients and the public are engaged in all the activities, and not only in designing services for communities, but actually individual patients have a way of ensuring that the services for them, that they have real choice. That it's predicated on sound plans which will deliver improvements, specific outcomes improvements, that the organisation is well governed, that the governance arrangements are robust, that the organisation works in partnership with all those others where they need to deliver improvements for patients, and that the leadership, we have confidence in the leadership of the organisation. So that's the first thing about these the frameworks. The second is, I think that we have changed in nature the CCG assurance framework since the interim publication in May to make it much more of a qualitative, summative a conversation arrangement between our area teams, who obviously have responsibility for that, and the CCGs, rather than, I think the initial one was started to look a bit more like the old, slightly old-style performance management framework. Now, that's not to say that this isn't any more robust in any shape or form, and it's absolutely key and critical that party to that in the dashboard we do have, and we look at on a quarterly basis, all those things which CCGs absolutely have to deliver for the public, whether they're in the Constitution or there are other issues that where we've made promises. But where it has moved to, it has moved much more to tailored conversations for individual CCGs based on their circumstances, but much more of a responsibility for the CCGs to demonstrate to us why they can demonstrate that they are making a difference for patients and how they're doing it. And again, all of that backed up by real hard-edged evidence from 360-degree views, from talking with all the other stakeholders, from making sure that they've got the right documentation in place that they can submit to us that show that they really are delivering all the things that we've asked from the 6 domains. And then threading through it all, something very much about the behaviours and the way that this is, support and development and assurance are two sides of a coin, so that we make sure that this process is much more about helping and supporting and developing CCGs to be the best they can be than simply marking their homework through assurance, although the information that we can give them about how we see them and the way we reflect that to them will be key to their development. If I move on to the direct commissioning framework, it's necessarily different for 2 reasons. One, because we didn't have authorisation for our direct commissioning, so we don't have that baseline of evidence, so that in its early phases, the direct commissioning assurance will need to do the sort of baseline we did for authorisation. And also, of course, because they're not whole organisations. So at the moment, what we're proposing here is that we ask our regional offices to oversee the assurance of the area team units who commission the direct commissioning, and to run that process for us on behalf of NHS England. And obviously, again, this will be work in progress as we start to understand better how they can do that. But perhaps a couple of questions that I might leave the Board with on the 2 frameworks. particularly on the direct commissioning. For the CCGs, it's clear that the CCGs at the end of the year, when they've got their full assurance results, will publish that for their patients and the public. So it will be clear for everyone to see through their health and wellbeing boards exactly how they did, what the full balanced scorecard looks like, and their action plan for remediation. So I think we need to start to think. We haven't absolutely finalised what we will do in terms of the direct commissioning. So we need to think about that, and we need to think about whether there's a way we can do that to and through the health and wellbeing boards. And then I think the second question about the direct commissioning is whether we need to then start to think about how we look at ourselves as a whole organisation. Clearly we're looking here at the ability of the area teams, but they are hugely dependent on all sorts of other things that go on in the regions, in the national support centres, in and around this table, in the board, in the way we govern the organisations, which we've looked at CCGs, and we're not. This particular document doesn't start to get into for NHS England, so that would be something we'd want to look at. And as ever with these things, this is a work in progress. You know, this is our first year of this. I'm sure there'll be lots of learning. I'm sure there'll be things that we can improve on, but we will try and make sure that the whole process is developmental for everybody. But I think as much developmental, particularly with the CCG one, for NHS England as the assurer as it will be for the CCGs in terms of being assured.
Good. Thank you very much. Questions? Comment? Margaret.
It strikes me that the move that has been made to from a sort of performance management base to actually making sure that the CCGs are asking themselves the right questions. In other words, that we are in the right assurance space, that we are actually allowing them to set their standards, monitor themselves, and come back to us with the right assurance responses, is actually absolutely the right thing, and I'm really delighted to see that. And I do think that the way in which we expect responses back from the area team shouldn't be too dissimilar, to be honest. I think that given that we should be leading from the front, that it is important that, albeit that the area teams do have to look to other organisations, to other areas, that it will be necessary for them to be saying to themselves, to the extent that we have to rely elsewhere, are we asking for similar sets of standards and questions to be asked, so that we can respond in the same way, so that we can so that, in other words, for every delegation there is an assurance response coming back up the line on the other side. So to the extent that they satisfy themselves, they can satisfy us, and it's not a mirror image of what's going on within the CCGs, but it's not dissimilar. I do think that's very important.
Other comments? Tim?
Just one thing, just going back to... I just wonder, it wasn't clear to me how committed we are in a way to the transparency of the process, which I particularly think for us is very important, in particular around primary care services, where people in the old, people had got used to public board meetings and so on. So I'm just... and perhaps this is something we should discuss afterwards, but to what degree we have a dashboard, we're going to have some structured conversations. How much in your mind are we making those structured conversations public? Are we going to be reporting them? Will there be some means by which people can get access to those? I just raise it because it wasn't...
Well, I think you're to some extent raising the same question that I did, in that we haven't absolutely finalised how we will do this, but somehow we have to. David, when we were talking about this, suggested that the Health and Wellbeing Board has to be key and kernel to this. So, I think we need to make sure that we report on the different aspects of direct commissioning separately. I can't say too often that NHS England's direct commissioning functions, the only thing they have in common is that NHS England commissions them, and they're done on different units. But I think that every health and wellbeing board deserves to know for its population across those five, how well those services are being commissioned, and therefore that's the basis of our mutual accountability with others around the table.
I do think this is a really important. I think will become increasingly important as we move through the development of the integration fund
Yeah.
going forward, because although health and wellbeing boards are developed in different ways in different places, they will have some governance responsibilities in relation to those pooled budgets.
Yeah.
So with that, I think becomes a much more open and regularised way of people working, and I absolutely see the place where NHS England, our staff in the area teams, will be accounting to those people for what they've done with their money and the decisions that they've been taken. I think that's a good thing, and if we can do it openly and transparently and manage it that way, I think it'd be really quite positive.
Good, thank you. Ed?
Yeah, just make the point. I mean, I massively welcome this. I think it's great. I think there has to be, or will need to be, a parallel process, because each CCG, when they come to the end of their year, will have to sign, probably chair and audit committee chair level, a governance statement, which will come into us, because David and the chairman will need to provide their own governance statement on the consolidated picture of NHS England, including all of the CCGs. So the timing for that, quite frankly, is relatively soon after their year end. It will have to be externally audited by their local auditors. And it's very, very important that the whole system is geared up to providing that assurance, in addition to what I think is going to be a later set of assurance around this. And you know, whilst this is really, really important, I cannot understate how important that first set of governance statements is going to be, and we have to make sure the system is really ready for it in advance, and there is no inconsistency between the two sets of statements that come through the process.
I think that's really vital, and of course the authorisation process, which was done at different stages for different CCGs, they authorised them on the basis that they had a robust governance structure and were planning to have the systems and processes in place. I think there are two things. I think, as you've pointed out, we need to be very clear from CCGs that they put themselves in a position to assure NHS England's board that that structure has continued, that the proper processes have been followed, and that with the additional assurance from internal and external auditors, that they can be very clear to us that they have followed the processes and can give us assurance about their accounts. I think that also we just need to be, NHS England would need to be vigilant in any soft intelligence or any reports from CCGs it picked up if we foresaw any problems there. Because I think you're right. I think that this process, looking at their governance review and the assurance, that will come too late for this specific issue.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think that it's absolutely clear that this board needs assurance on both, on the CCGs and on direct commissioning. On the CCGs, we commend the approach that you're proposing, and that it is an open and transparent model. But that we know that there are always limits to the assurance process, and the use of soft intelligence just to test the returns that we're getting, I think, will be absolutely critical. We take on board the Deputy Chairman's caution to us about time and the need to get on with this promptly at year end. And finally, I think in principle, our own commitment to ensuring that our assurance of ourselves and within us the direct commissioning processes and the different systems is in parallel with what we expect from CCGs. I think this is quite a demanding process when we're still an organisation that's settling down and trying to stabilise direct commissioning, which is not a trivial matter. But nonetheless, we're only going to function properly as a board, I think, if we've got a parallel model of assurance.